All right, today's target will be finding slope between 2 points. This is very key because what we're going to do is we're going to come up with an equation today that allows us to find the slope when we're given 2 points. That means we don't have to graph it. We don't have to draw an axis and plot the 2 points and go through all that process. We can use an equation and find the slope between 2 points rather easily. Key thing here to remember, we've done a previous video on slope. You may have to go back and watch that if necessary. But you have to remember that slope is rise over run. Very key. The reason that that's key is that when we use the equation for finding slope, we have to remember that rise represents a change in the y values. Rise is how far you're moving up and down. It's the difference in the y values or the change in the y values to move from one point to another. Similarly, run would be change in x values. Going left and right, how much do we have to change to go from one point to another on the x-axis? So when we write this as an equation, it becomes y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. The idea being here is that we're going to be given 2 points. The first point is x2, one point is x2, y2. The other point is x1, y1. So that's what the little subscripts mean. Just telling you the difference between the 2 points. So let's look at how we actually use this. So here we've got 2 points. We want to find the slope between these 2 points. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and label them. What I mean by that is here's our first point. Okay, so we're going to label it as x1, y1. Here's our second point. We're going to label that as x2, y2. So now we can go to our equation, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, and just plug our values in. So y2 was 10, y1 was negative 2. On the bottom, x2 was negative 11, x1 was 19. So when we simplify that, remember that if you subtract a negative, that becomes adding a positive. So 10 plus 2 becomes 12. Negative 11 minus 19 is negative 30. Always simplify. So 12 and 30 are both divisible by 6. So 12 divided by 6 is 2. 30 divided by 6 is 5. And we still got that negative there, that negative 30. You can put the negative on the 2, you can put it on the 5, or you can just put it out front. It doesn't really matter as long as there's only one negative sign. So our slope between these 2 points is negative 2/5, or negative 2 over 5. Let's look at a couple examples. These are special cases. So let's look at how they shape out. So first one, we've got x1, y1, x2, y2. So when we put that in the equation, we're going to have 3 minus 3, y2 minus y1, over x2 minus x1, so 20 minus 19. 3 minus 3 is 0. 20 minus 19 is 1. So we get 0 over 1. Now, we always have to simplify, so we cannot leave our answer like this. What we have to do is recognize that anything 0 divided by anything is 0. So our simplified answer will either be write out 0, or you can simply write it as a number. Okay, but if you leave it as a fraction, that's not totally simplified, so that will not be counted as correct. Got to make sure you simplify it and write it as 0, either as a word or as a number. Here with number 2, once again, we've got x1, y1, x2, y2. So we're going to have 8 minus negative 13, and then we're going to have 17 minus 17. Remember, when you subtract a negative, it becomes adding a positive. So it becomes 21 over 0. Once again, we cannot leave this as our final answer because it's not simplified. Anything divided by 0 is undefined. You cannot divide a number by 0. So what we have to do is when we recognize this, when we see this, our actual slope is written as undefined. Okay. Once again, if you leave your answer as 21 over 0, that's not fully simplified, therefore will not be a correct answer. All right, last example. Hopefully at this point we're getting used to labeling our points. x1, y1, x2, y2. So we get negative 15 minus 0, negative 11 minus 3. So that gives us negative 15 over negative 14. Can we simplify that? Absolutely. What you have to remember is that a negative divided by a negative is really just a positive number. So the simplified form would be 15 over 14. Okay. Now, one last thing. Some of you might be asking whether it really matters which point we call x1, y1 and which point we call x2, y2. And the answer is no. And the reason is that typically we see our equation as y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. But realistically, you could switch these. So for example, you could do y1 minus y2 on top. But in order to do that, you have to make sure you also switch the bottom. So the bottom would then have to be x1 minus y2. Or sorry, x2. Okay. So it doesn't matter what order you subtract, what order you put them into the equation, as long as you're consistent. So let's look at this. Let's flip this around and do it the other way. Okay. So if we do 0 minus negative 15, so that's y1 minus y2. Then on the bottom we have to do x1 minus x2. 0 minus a negative 15 turns into plus a positive, so we get positive 15. 3 minus a negative 11, once again becomes plus a positive 11, so we get positive 14. And notice that our answer is exactly the same. So once again, just to kind of cap this off, doesn't matter what order, as long as you're consistent and you always remember that your y's go on top. y1, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay? That's all I got for you for slope.